Red Nose Day 2017. Make some noise!
It's only Ed Sheeran.
What?
Hey.
Look, face Ed Sheeran. I ain't bothered!
And the snail says, that's Michelle. 24 hours of this.
The cool kids are sitting on the back of the sofa.
We thought about doing this with slides, but we actually thought it would be kind of fun to do it a little bit different. So we're going to do it fireside chat, as the Americans would say, sans fire or anything else. But hopefully it should be really interesting. We've got representatives from the business, we've got representatives from the developers and from the operational side. And the aim is to really bring them together to tell the story of how this application was built. From all the different aspects, and it should be a pretty good story. It's got mission criticality, it's got multiple clouds, and it's ultimately about saving lives. So it should be great. We're hoping to finish a little bit early as well, so that we can have questions from the audience as well. So, to kick us off, maybe if each of you could introduce yourself, starting with you, Zenon.
So I'm Zenon Hannick. I'm the CTO at Comic Relief. I've been at Comic Relief for about 7 years. Before that, I've kind of started in development, working in financial services and a couple of startups, and then I joined Comic Relief.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tim Savage. I'm one of the founders of Armakuni. We're a cloud foundry specialist, and also we focus on cloud-native transformation with organizations. So we've been in existence since 2012. Prior to that, I've got quite a wide-ranging development background, I suppose, across government, banking sort of organizations.
Brilliant. Okay, David.
So my name's David Laing. I am a long-time member of the open source Cloud Foundry community, which Pivotal started and is the main contributor to. And I've recently joined them, and now I work helping Pivotal, running the bleeding edge versions of Pivotal Cloud Foundry on new IaaSes like GCP.
Brilliant. And I'm Tom Gray. I head up the customer engineering team here in the UK for Google Cloud. I'm guessing most people here in the audience will have heard of Comic Relief. Zenon, could you tell us a little bit about the challenge faced by Comic Relief?
Often people ask me what I actually do. They think I work 1 day a year for the kind of Red Nose Day, and every alternative year we run a Sport Relief event, which also culminates in a kind of 7-hour TV show. But essentially it's kind of 18 months to kind of 18 months to a year's in the planning for each kind of Red Nose Day that we do. We obviously have a lot of partnerships, a lot of things that we need to get sorted out. From a technology point of view, I joined in 2011, and in 2011 we had a kind of an application that took all of our donations. We realized we needed to rebuild it. I suppose before we even get to that, from a kind of background perspective, essentially we have the year that we plan, and then we have an 8 to 6 week campaign during which we have other events, but it all culminates in kind of the 7 hours of TV. Now, we've raised over £1 billion in the time that we've been together, and it all started with Richard Curtis and some other colleagues of his, Lenny Henry, and they used to get checks in the post, and they'd have this small office in Soho, and these big bags full of checks would arrive. They'd have to open them, get the checks out, go down to the bank, get those checks paid in, and like in terms of kind of cycle and feedback loops and things like that, it took a long time for the money to come in. It would take months for all the money to come in, and whereas now we have this 7-hour TV show. Now, there's a lot of technologies that have to deal with very high spikes. But if, for example, you're building software to cope with ticket sales at Glastonbury, people will come back if it doesn't work because they really want to go to Glastonbury. With our event, we show great comedy, we then show great films about the difference that the money could make in people's lives, and people respond to that emotively. Now, if they don't take the money at that point, if we don't take the money at that point, they won't come back to give us money. So we really have a kind of a short window of kind of 7 hours in which we need to take that money. So for us, it's really about building technology that can cope with those spikes in traffic. Because even within the night of TV, whereas if you look at kind of traffic spike across the year, you'll see nothing, then a big spike on that day. But even within those 7 hours, those spikes are kind of responding to the times when we're showing those films that show the need that there is out there in the world. So really, it's about making sure that we're building technologies that can cope with that.
Brilliant. Thank you. And you mentioned the application from before. Could you tell me a little bit more about how you tackled that in previous years?
So 2011 was the first year I joined Comic Relief, and I worked with my colleagues. And what used to happen is we used to get 12 technology partners together, you know, our DBMS providers and all these people used to give us their time for free, as we were a charity, and that was fantastic. What would that involve would be about 30 to 50 people having to work together once a year. We'd get some kit delivered, lent to us, which would move into a data center in London. So around November, we'd be expected to come, and then it'd be delayed, and it'd be around December, and then it would come in January, and we'd all be freaking out because we only had kind of a certain amount of time to get all these groups together and put this application together. We didn't really even change it very much year on year. Changed the front end a little bit with kind of new messaging, make some small changes, but the difficulty was that it was a bit of a kind of snowflake, and it came together with this kind of what I'd like to call like human glue. I mean, we didn't like melt people down to make glue, but you know, that kind of that institutional knowledge that people had, where we'd get the application together and we'd see this problem, and then someone would say, oh yeah, I remember that issue last year. Yeah, what we had to do was just do this quick thing, and we never remembered to save it in the configuration file, all this kind of stuff. So, and then the big issue around it was kind of testability. We'd build it, we'd scale it, no changes at all, let's test it, see if it works. So it doesn't work. Kind of that cycle going through that would take kind of like days and days. So essentially, it worked. We always took all the money. There'd always be a couple of small problems here and there, but essentially we took the money. But that year in 2011, we'd kind of been growing in terms of traffic. As people moved more and more online, the amount of traffic was growing and growing, and we realized that we really hit the edges of it. And it was, you know, we really came very close to our application not being able to cope, so we realized that we needed to kind of redesign it.
And so you looked at cloud for doing that? Yeah,
I mean, for us, cloud was almost invented for our kind of pattern, essentially. There's absolutely no traffic at all, and then we have kind of massive spikes. For us to be able, if we were in a position where we had to commercially provision hardware to support our night, we'd be, you know, it would cost a lot of money. And obviously we had help from partners who'd lend us kit and all that goodwill. But essentially the great thing about the cloud for us was we wanted to do a number of things. We wanted to avoid any technology tie-in with partner tie-in. You know, those partners working with us was fantastic. But as time went on, partners acquired other partners. All the partners started moving into all areas of the stack. So whereas before they were quite happy to do the database for us, they'd say, well, actually we do this as well and we do that as well. And kind of managing those relationships. You know, someone who'd kind of agreed to do stuff would move on, then we wouldn't know who to be speaking to. Would they have the same kind of desire to work with us? So the big thing was no tie-in with any partners. Another big thing was not to be limited by technology. We really wanted to be able for our technology to be able to cope with whatever kind of level of growth that we saw. Another big thing for us is obviously in terms of risk reductions, to be out of scope of PCI as far as possible. And then finally, we really needed to be able to kind of utilize kind of modern patterns, kind of test room development, being able to use all of those kind of things. So the cloud really worked perfectly for us.
Brilliant. And obviously, very pleased that you chose to use Google Cloud, but I understand you used other cloud vendors as well. Is that right? Yeah,
certainly to start with, we had a mix of AWS as kind of public cloud provider, and then we had kind of an internal, the application ran on an internal private cloud that we ran at the data center above, kind of on top of vSphere. Both running kind of Cloud Foundry platform as a service kind of technology.
Brilliant, thank you. And on that point, I guess, Tim, your organization actually built the application. Could you tell me more about that experience?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's been quite a ride. So we got involved with Comic Relief in 2012. So I guess off the back of 2011 and the situation they were in. And we pitched what we considered to be the solution to the challenges they were facing at that point in time. But I guess even right back at that point, we were thinking about, for Comet Relief, this is a huge risk. We're talking about a large percentage of their annual revenue tied up in one platform, one tiny window of time. So right back then, we, as a small company, we were sort of pitching we knew how to do it. We could vision, we could see how we could get there, but it was the journey we were going to take them on that we needed to establish. So what we proposed was a very agile development cycle. We were going to go through various iterations over the next sort of 3 months from the point at which we were talking and pitching to give them the comfort that we could actually deliver the solution that they needed without them having to take the high risk of engaging with us for the whole piece. They weren't going to sort of ditch all relationships and kind of move over to us without some confidence. So we pitched, I think it was June 2012, and we were awarded the work around about that sort of time. And literally from that point we started. I think we had our first environment up and running at the end of the first day, having been awarded it. 2 weeks later, we went back in and demoed to the directors of Comet Relief a continuous deployment pipeline into a production environment of a very basic donation page. And we went back every 2 weeks to show them what we'd done, how it was going, talk through problems with them. And I think that's one of the things that we've got from the approaches we've taken from this cloud approach we have now. So I guess in terms of what we delivered, we were very aware of the problems that Comet Relief was facing. I think as Zenon's just laid out, we've got to take up to 500 credit card transactions a second. We've got a 7-hour window in which we're going to do it. It's once a year, and can't fail. So that was the solution we had to deliver. So what we proposed was a very cloud-native solution. It was focusing on various key tenets, but it primarily, as I think Zenon's just mentioned, multi-cloud, multi-payment provider, multi-anything that we depended on. Anything that could give us issues, sort of redundancy issues, we attempted to multiply. It was built with a mindset of failure from the ground up. We assumed at all points that every part was going to fail in some way. Right. So that was the approach right from the start. And so we focused on mean time to recovery, availability over consistency, and as Zenon mentioned, sort of a totally test-driven approach. So I'll mention that in a minute. But so in terms of what we delivered and what it is now, the platform consists of 28 microservices. Okay. They are Ruby applications. They're fairly simple. We had all sorts of ideas in the early days about multi-language, but what we've learned is that what we can test and drive, that's the world of security and confidence that we have. So it's 28 Ruby microservices. They're all continuously deployed into production. You make a change to any of those applications, the entire stack will deploy, and within a matter of minutes you'll have feedback and you'll be in production. We have and are able, we have such confidence in it, and one of the things we're able to do is during events, whilst we're taking 100 credit card transactions a second, we're able to blue-green deploy changes into the production environment to make changes, and that's something that was just unheard of before. I'd sat in meetings years back, 2 weeks before the event, where there was no chance of changing anything.
Right.
So in terms of the platforms and how they're deployed, for event night, we use, the infrastructure we use, so we were going to introduce Cloud Foundry. Mm-hmm. So Cloud Foundry, in fact, do you want to introduce Cloud Foundry? That'd be better.
Yeah, so Cloud Foundry plays in a similar space to Kubernetes, but it has a slightly different philosophy. The basic philosophy is, give me your code, I'll run it in the cloud, and you haven't got to care how, basically. So you just need to give us the Ruby code, and we'll then do all the container building and orchestration and all that magic so that it just works. And from your perspective, the cloud just implements this contract, this simple contract, I suppose 12-factor app.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So we, in terms of deploying our the sort of event night infrastructure, we run 3 front-end, and I'm going to call them shards. We've always referred to them as shards. It's not great naming technology. concepts. But a shard for us is a Cloud Foundry deployed in a geographic location. So we'll have 3 front-end shards and 1 management shard. So we might have the front-end shards. I think this year we were US East, Belgium, and Dublin, I think. So that's how we kind of deploy the platform. So we're deploying all of our applications into each of these shards. We then load balance, DNS load balance, stateless traffic across those front-end applications. So each one of those is capable of taking the entire event night's traffic. So they're load tested up to 500 donations per second. We can lose 2 entire regions and quite happily take the entire event's donations. And each time a donation goes through any of those shards, so you might start on 1 and finish on the 3rd one, for example, each time an event occurs that's related to your donation, those events are passed through to the management shard as deltas. And those deltas are then collated, event sourced in effect, and we have sort of eventual consistency there, which gives us the processing that occurs after the event. So we might be running emails are going out sort of asynchronously. We've got various export mechanisms going on, the reporting side. And this side of the business, or of the process, we're less dependent on. Reporting isn't as important as taking donations during a sort of a peak where you're taking 500 donations a second. That's our primary focus. So I guess also there's the payment service provider integration. So we use 3 different payment service providers. That gives us synchronous, so live transacting capability, which is how we try to run the whole event, but we're also able to process asynchronously. So we can store with the PSPs, credit card data, and then process 5, 10 minutes, an hour later, whatever's required, depending on what events might be occurring during the night. And it gives us that sort of wiggle room.
Brilliant. Okay. We mentioned Pivotal Cloud Foundry before. What kind of drove you? Was it your team that decided to use PCF, and what kind of drove that decision for you? So
I guess when we originally pitched the concept, we pitched the use of PaaS, so Platform as a Service. Right. What we were looking for at that point in time was the ability to abstract away the infrastructure so that we could be portable. We're building a complex app that we want to be able to run in on multiple services, and we needed to be able to pull ourselves away from that. Right. And PaaS gave us that capability. So we looked at a couple of options, and Cloud Foundry was a front runner at the start, and it remained the solution we used. So we ended up using Cloud Foundry, and I say it's a testament to Pivotal and Cloud Foundry that we're still the contract that we have and that the developers have with Cloud Foundry still remains the same. It's we haven't changed that in the entire time. I think the letters of it changed. It was there's a way of doing it, and the names changed, but that's about it in 5 years. So from a consistency perspective, we've been able to develop and improve against this contract that has remained, and I think it's one of the things that's made it very simple to support this over the period of time we have. So it's enabled us, if you look at what we've delivered, we're looking at platforms that run on multiple infrastructure providers across multiple geographic regions. We've been running it for 5 years, and it's taken us 6 people to do it. That's the capability it's put in our hands.
Brilliant. And David, so as I understand it, Pivotal worked closely with Comic Relief and with Armakuni to actually provide the operational environment. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so one of Pivotal's visions is to do the right thing, and I think participating in Comic Relief is doing the right thing. And I just want to go back to the point that that Tim made about how having this contract that your infrastructure provides you with is so liberating, because you can just write your app, do all the hard work of test driving and continuous deployment and everything, and just stop thinking about the infrastructure, and that infrastructure's remained consistent. And I want to echo it back and say, so as representing the operator of the infrastructure, that contract is incredibly valuable as well, because we can come at it from the other side, where Pivotal and Google have partnered to make sure that Cloud Foundry runs well on Google Cloud. And we can just focus on ensuring that the differences that Google Cloud has are abstracted away, and it's not something that the application developers ever need to think about. And so we just make sure that our implementation of the Cloud Foundry platform on Google does what it says on the tin, implements that contract. And we don't even have to know that much about how the application itself works. So as an example, when you were describing the number of microservices, I didn't know there were 28. And yet I operated them on the night, and I operated them in 2 separate geographic regions thanks to Google's distributed network.
Brilliant. And you mentioned the partnership between Pivotal and Google Cloud. Could you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so Pivotal and Google Cloud have a really close partnership, and Google's come to the party to help write the glue between the Pivotal Cloud Foundry platform and the Google Cloud. And our experience has just been fantastic, basically. Google Cloud is a rock, or compute engine, which is the bit we have the most experience with, is a rock-solid product. And our experience was it just worked. Which is sort of a boring thing, but in operations you want boring. That's fantastic. But there were 2 things particularly that I'd like to sort of call out. So the first one was just to talk back to this this question of the incredibly spiky traffic, and it's very unusual in that some things you think, oh, there's going to be a gradual spike as something happens, and it'll keep going up. And then, if people can't access now, then they'll just come back and access a little bit later, 2 minutes later, whilst you scale things up. And that's not true in the comic relief thing. There's this build-up and this emotional build-up and this call to action to please donate, and everyone jumps on their phones and donates at the same time. So you can't preheat things. You can't scale on demand. You have to be ready. And Google's load balance infrastructure is. It blows my mind as a technologist. This huge global load balancer that's serving all of Google.com's traffic. It couldn't be more scaled up, and you get to use just a sliver of that. So we just didn't see any issues at all with scale up times. It just 0 to 500 a second and was fine. And then the other thing is the billing on Google Cloud is just refreshingly simple. In other places, if you have your own private data center, you have no idea what things cost, in my experience, or there's such a long time, you have to start thinking about 6 months in advance. It doesn't make any sense. And on some other places, you have to have a team that analyzes all the billing data and decides how far in advance to commit to various things. And in Google Cloud, you just get the sustained discount, and you stop thinking about it. And you can focus on the important thing, like taking donations.
So I guess a big question, how did it go on the big night?
So in 2011, first year that I did Comic Relief, I can safely say that the night of TV was the single most exciting work experience I've ever had. It was, the issues that came up were kind of small in the grand scheme of things, but when you've had a kind of 8-week build-up of stress, you're not sure it's going to work, you haven't slept for a week, and you're there in this room, and even the smallest problem happens, and your stomach drops 3 floors, and you're suddenly just sat there thinking, oh my God, everything's going wrong. And in fact, it wasn't. But compared to this year, I was, like we said about ops being boring, I was so bored. I was literally so bored that I kind of thought, why are people paying me money to do this? Because this is so boring. Nothing happened. Nothing went wrong. All of the money came in. The spikes were handled. The kind of graphs looked consistent. It was all just fantastic. And that really is, it makes me incredibly proud of the team here and the team back at the office of Comic Relief. And but the reality is, I wanted one thing to go wrong so I could justify the fact that I was there. It was brilliant. It was very, very boring.
That's brilliant. Yeah. Any further comments?
I think I'd agree. It was boring. It's unfortunately that's what we aspire to.
Yes, exactly.
That is utter success for us. So,
and I think it's. Particularly, we're sat here in Google Next. There's all these technologies out there who are doing incredible stuff. I mean, that spanner stuff just blew my mind. And there's all these things that are happening, and we really take it for granted. I think we really take it for granted that I could say, I mean, it wasn't long ago that we kind of agreed with Pivotal that we were going to try and do the GCP. It was kind of a matter of months, and actually, the amount of work that these guys put in to make it happen wasn't as large as you would think it would do. And it just works, and it is really incredible. And sometimes I kind of have to think back to those days where you have that kind of Java app and all these people sitting in a room scratching their heads trying to remember what they did a year ago that made this thing work. And you think about how incredible it is that you can have an app that was kind of built 5 years ago, and we update it every year, and it works across AWS, it works across GCP, it can work across a kind of private data center, and it could just work. And for me, the really big thing about the kind of the PaaS paradigm is that I don't really have to care about how the platform works. And it's almost kind of as a CTO, the less I need to know in order to be able to assess risk and be able to say that this thing is going to work to my directors. And when the email that I send the week before, everything's on track, things are looking good, it's all going to be okay. That kind of makes my CEO sleep easily at night. The less I need to know in order to be able for that to be true, the better for me.
Brilliant. So I guess, we talked about the technology, but what did it mean for Comic Relief as a business?
Well, it's the key thing that we talked about before. We took all of the money, and we took all of the money synchronously, and that's a really big thing for us, because with the old application, what we used to do is we used to we'd get the credit card data, tokenize it, and then it would wait, and we'd be, kind of maybe 10 years ago, we were kind of finishing the processing kind of Sunday evening. And so if you're sat there Sunday evening and you get an email saying, oh, your donation didn't work, please give again, the click-through rate was practically nothing. Maybe it didn't, went to your spam folder, whatever. People just didn't donate again. Whereas now we process synchronously. We process synchronously for the whole night. So if you put your credit card number in wrong, if there's some issue with your credit card, you get feedback straight away, and therefore you can donate. So we took all the money. We took kind of millions of pounds. And sometimes, like I said, when you're in technology and you're focused on like transactions levels and the thing coming through and the thing working, you kind of forget this kind of money came in and kind of fundamentally changed people's lives for the better in the UK and abroad, and has really made a massive difference in the world. And I think ourselves as kind of Comic Relief can be extremely proud of that, and I think these kind of partners who help us should be extremely proud of that.
Wonderful, thank you.